So thank you everyone for joining. Welcome to this sort of sync licensing Q&A with Crosstown Arts. My name is Max. I work at Songtrust as a publishing associate. Guys, feel free to introduce yourselves.
I will. Hi, I'm Mackenzie Webster. I'm the Musician and Artist Services Manager here at Crosstown Arts, and super excited to chat with you all, and thank you again to Songtrust.
Yeah, I'm Charles. I am the Publishing Support Coordinator here at Crosstown Arts.
Fantastic. And I think we can just hop into the questions right now. Just before we go in there, a quick disclaimer to some people who might not be familiar with Songtrust. We do not actually offer creative services such as sync. We will collect on any back-end royalties you generate for them, but we do highly encourage you guys to pursue these opportunities, especially with the knowledge that you'll gain today. But let's jump right in. We're talking about sync today, but Crosstown Arts is so much more than just that. So you guys want to give us like a quick description of what you guys do, what your mission is, how you help artists?
Sure. So Crosstown Arts is a nonprofit contemporary arts organization dedicated to further cultivating the creative community here in Memphis. We do provide resources and create opportunities and experience to inspire, support, and connect a diverse range of creative people, projects, and audiences. So that's kind of our strict version of our mission, but generally our goal is to help the creative community here in Memphis through a variety of initiatives that I'm sure we'll get to a little bit later. And yeah, we're just all about supporting the music or creative community here.
Fantastic. What kind of services do you guys offer artists, generally speaking? What are some of the things that people come to you for?
For sure. So a little bit outside of the scope of the Musician Artist Services team here, which I'll circle back on. Crosstown Arts actually has an artist residency program, which, shameless plug, our artist and residency program's application is open right now until July 15th, and it is open to any and everyone, no matter where you're based, and to all art media. So whether you're a visual artist, a filmmaker, a music creator, you should definitely look to check out and apply for the Artist in Residency program. There are various terms, and this is for the 2023 program year, but you're able to come to Memphis, live in Crosstown Concourse, where our office is held, and basically have resources at your disposal to work in your respective practice. So you'll have a studio space, be able to commune and kind of live with other artists and creatives, and really just spend time on your practice and your project. So that's one piece. And then under Musician and Artist Services, we have publishing ad support. We have healthcare support, which is working with a local health program, Church Health. And we act as a liaison between Church Health and music creatives here in Memphis to provide healthcare coverage. And then Crosstown Sync, which we are building a catalog of Memphis music. So whether it be creatives that are here in the city creating, or individuals who are from Memphis but no longer here or living here, and then individuals who solely come to Memphis just to create, which is more common than not given our musical history, all the amazing studios we have here. And so we are going after music to include in our library to pitch, because a lot of times people are actively looking for Memphis music, and given that sound is super expansive. But our hope in really starting Crosstown Sync was to diversify revenue streams for music creatives. And given we started right before everything shut down with the pandemic, and it was super timely, just given no shows, and obviously, you can't always count on music streaming. So Sync is a great way to generate revenue, as well as it's a great awareness tool. And so Crosstown Sync was kind of our way of providing another outlet for music creatives to build a sustainable career.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that you guys managed to provide so many services for artists and across so many different art types. I imagine Crosstown Arts must be like a proper lab for creativity. That sounds really awesome, especially the healthcare initiative. That's so rare. But since we're talking about sync today, you guys are a sync house, kind of. Would you guys consider yourself a sync house? And if not, how would you differ from what a traditional sync house does. And maybe even start by explaining what exactly a sync house is for those who are completely new to the field.
Sure. I use the term sync house, sync library, sync catalog all interchangeably, but essentially a company or organization that is a sync, their job is to collect music and find licensing opportunities for it. And that's exactly what we're doing here at Crosstown. So for those of you who make music here or and make music, we would go through a process of acquiring music. Obviously, there's agreements in place and such. But our job actually would be to pitch that to people, music supervisors, talent agencies, ad agencies, to find a home for these songs and then help artists get paid. And we are a little bit different than other sync organizations. We take a lower cut. We try to give artists a little bit more. So that's one way that we might differ from others. But in general, most sync houses, sync libraries, sync companies, their job is just to find a home for your music and help folks get paid in the process.
Right. And as long as we're talking about sort of different terms and different roles that exist within the world of sync, if you could just give a quick definition of the difference between a sync house like yourself and someone who is a music supervisor, which is kind of on the other end of the sync spectrum.
Sure. So, like I said before, we actually license music, so we will be reaching out to music supervisors whose job is to find music for their projects. Supervisors aren't necessarily in the business of acquiring music in a library that they'll just grab from. Their job is actually to seek out music, seek out sync companies, independent creators, their music. So we are almost a liaison for music supervisors to get to these independent creators. So we're kind of like that middleman, if you want to get it that way.
Awesome. Thanks for defining that. I just wanted to give kind of a picture to those joining us today to show that this is really an ecosystem with sort of different players, and the music has to travel along a path in order to make it from, let's say, your studio into someone else's sort of video or TV show or movie. And speaking of that kind of pathway, I think something that would be really helpful for those joining us today, especially if they're looking for syncs, is if you could guys kind of walk us through what the process looks like from, let's say, the moment someone submits their song to Crosstown Arts, because I know that you guys have a submission page for sync on your website. Everyone here should definitely go check that out if they get a chance to. What does the ideal journey from the moment of submission to the placement actually look like?
Great question. So from submission, which I think is one of the fun parts, is actually listening to the music. But from submission, we obviously have a conversation with that individual, tell out our kind of agreement terms for being a part of our catalog. And then once those are agreed upon, we ingest that music, and that's really kind of one of the detailed oriented portions of the process, because once we get that music, it needs to be organized in a way. We tag it based on the various sounds, so that could be genre, instrumentation that's used, it's whether there's vocals or not, and then from there, once we have it organized in a way, the opportunity to begin pitching it begins. So whether we're pitching to a brief, which is essentially just kind of a document or a call for a certain type of music, and it's usually within a tight turnaround time, but it could be as specific as, say, a production house is working on a commercial spot that's 30 seconds, and they're looking for a song that it kind of invokes this certain emotion, has this certain pace, and if we have it in our catalog, then we would or have a number of songs that kind of fit that certain criteria or certain style, then we would pitch that for consideration. And sometimes you might have the opportunity to, call on someone who's in your catalog to try to create something specifically for that brief. And sometimes there's no brief, but a supervisor may be working on a new project or another season of a show, and you're kind of pitching based on the certain style, music that has been in the show, especially if it's something that's set in a certain time period. May not want to pitch to a show that's set in the 80s, something that is more now, or based in like the early 2000s. So understanding kind of your audience, the supervisor, the project, is key. And a lot of times supervisors have certain criteria based on whether they want totally new stuff, um, things that are unreleased, or even if it's not necessarily new in terms of newly released, but new to them, like it hasn't been before. All those things come into play, and then a supervisor enjoys something or feels as though this is the right fit for on, then we go through the process of that paperwork, which on the front end with our catalog, we push to have pretty much all the music as a one stop, which that we can administer on both sides.
Exactly. I just want to pause here quickly,
Yeah,
define one stop, because people, I mean, that's what it might be going over some people's heads.
I'll actually let Charles talk about one stop.
So sure, since we're talking publishing, obviously we know we got the publishing and the master. One stop basically makes it so we, the singer, can administer on both sides. If the independent creator owns their masters and they get all their, collaborators to sign a agreement, then basically one signature will be required to land a sync. And that's what makes it, that's what makes our catalog appealing to supervisors. The less hassle, the less work that supervisors have to do to license music, the more likely they want to work with you in the future.
Yeah, I cannot stress how important that point is to those of you guys listening. The easier you can make it for someone to access the information necessary to sign a song, the more likely it is that you'll get that sync. It's almost not even a question of how good the music is at this point. And it's just like, is it easy? Is this an easy process for the music supervisor? But yeah, please go on about sort of, I think we're talking about the documentation, the paperwork that needs to be signed. I guess we're going to be talking about cue sheets as well now at this point, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, if Charles, if you want to do that process.
So yeah, cue sheets. Essentially, there's paperwork. There's a paper trail that needs to happen post licensing. So if we're syncing to, I don't know, Gossip Girl reboot on HBO Max, there's an entire sheet of every song, what part of the TV show that it came in on, down to minute and second, and you need to be able to report all of that, including information. If you have a BMI account, your ID number, same with ASCAP, so that people can find your registration amongst all of the other registrations of songs with the same. So metadata is very important, to fill out a cue sheet. But essentially, the cue sheet is just a collection of all the metadata for that song itself and in relation to the TV show, movie, etc.
Nice. Awesome. You guys deal primarily in, so from what I'm getting, the deal structure that you guys have set up for the artists you choose to represent for sync is based around this idea that it's a one-stop. Do you have any other kinds of deals that you try to negotiate, or are the artists that are coming to you and getting into deals with you usually signing to a very sort of standard deal that you sort of have across the board?
So, go ahead, Charles.
Well, I'll start. There's not many variations to it, but I will say, as far as One Stop is concerned, we kind of use our publishing support initiative as a funnel almost into. So we try to help people using our free resources, help them get to the finish line when it comes to collaborator agreements and such, so that when it's time to license, we've kind of helped do all of that dirty work on the front end. And I'll just let Kenzie add anything else to that one.
Yeah, and then from there, we work under non-exclusive sort of agreement, and most times you'll see a non-exclusive or exclusive. And with non-exclusive, it allows for the music creative not to be solely tied to us and them in terms of sync. And versus exclusive, you're solely represented by this company or sync house in terms of sync. And so we thought non was better and more artist friendly.
Absolutely.
And even within that non-exclusive, we have a flexible 1-year term. So if another opportunity comes about, as long as we're given days notice. We can see through anything that's in our queue, make sure we remove the music from our pitching library. And then we wish, the creative nothing but success. And we just found that to be just a lot more artist friendly.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely sounds like it. Would you say that non-exclusive or exclusive is the norm in for sync houses, or are you guys like just particularly generous towards artists?
It depends. I mean, there's definitely a lot more exclusive agreements, which is understandable because you don't want to find that you're, say us and another sync company are pitching the same music for the same artist, say same opportunities, because poorly on one involved. So the exclusivity definitely has its pros. But a lot of times if you're working where there's just an understanding that, hey, you've provided these songs to us to pitch, but they have, more music, and artists have more music in their catalog that may be pitched by another entity. As long as we have that open communication, we haven't run into any problems.
Fantastic. And then I think now that we're approaching the end, I got to ask, what is it that would ever make a song not get signed for a sync, aside from the music not being the right fit? Like, what are some of the things that artists do that is essentially going to make it impossible, even if the song is a perfect fit, for it to not get synced?
I'll jump in first. Metadata, super important. A quick tip would be, if you're getting MP3 files and sending those over to supervisors, put the writers, their IPI numbers, their PRO affiliation in the metadata of the file itself. So that way, when supervisors access the file, they don't need to text you or email you to ask you for all the extra info. Emails, phone numbers, all be within the metadata of that track. And so the only thing the supervisor would have to do is to reach out in the event they actually want to license the song. So being very mindful of where the metadata for your music is and placing it within the files itself, it'll save you a lot of trouble.
For sure. And I would also even say, with the music component, making sure that either you don't use sample relations or sort of elements of production that aren't clear, or if you are using any elements that are borrowed, then you have that clearance, because we've seen cases where an individual doesn't have something cleared and doesn't kind of give that information, and the song is placed, and then there's a lot of grunt work and just a lot of issues on the back end, which doesn't work in anyone's favor. And a lot of times, relationships can be broken that way. But if you do, with your music, if you're using samples, packs, or interpolations, making sure that you do kind of so that you'll have your place, and all parties involved kind of walk away and are moving in a professional manner.
Absolutely. I mean, there's definitely a trend here, right? Just make it as easy as possible. The simpler you can make it, the more readily accessible the information is, the easier it is going to be for you to get a sync. But since Charles touched upon BMI, he mentioned a couple of keywords there, BMI and IPI numbers, right? So this is the part where we get to talk about, I think, a good segue into, if you do get a sync, how do you get paid for that sync? How are you going to make, what kind of royalties exist? There's generally sort of a front-end payment, and as well as the back-end royalties. And if you guys could speak to those two, and how an artist might need to be set up in order to make sure that they're actually collecting the money that they get for the sync once they've gone through the whole trouble of actually getting one.
Yeah, so our front-end royalties are basically the fee that it would take to license the song. Usually it's all in for both the publishing and master. But in some cases, if you get a cover that's cleared, then maybe only the publishing or maybe only the master. But in general, it's usually an all-in fee. The back royalties are probably almost exclusively from your PRO. So in North America, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, I think GMR might be considered a North American PRO. And basically what you need to do before you even get to the licensing part of the entire process is to register your music. Soon as your song is in some type of tangible form, go ahead and put that registration in on BMI or ASCAP so that metadata has time to be approved and such. Store that metadata somewhere safe so that when the time comes, it'll just be so much easier to drop in all of the data that somebody might need.
Absolutely. For example, the IPI number that Charles mentioned earlier, that's something that you can only get if you affiliate with BMI or ASCAP or any other PRO if you guys are joining us from outside the US. Another great step, just to interject, because this is my area of specialty, right? Royalty collections here. Royalties are for the most part generated on the local level. So if you're getting a sync placement in like an ad that's being played in Germany, for example, your performance royalties are going to get paid out to the German society. So you're going to want to be affiliated with a publisher as well. And Songtrust is a good example of a pub admin that can do this for you. My turn to plug, right? You guys got your plug, I get mine now. You guys are going to want to be affiliated with a publishing administrator. It doesn't have to be Songtrust, but I recommend Songtrust, obviously.
We do too.
To have your songs registered internationally at all these different performance rights organizations that Charles just mentioned, so that no matter where the sync that you're getting is streamed or played, if it's a commercial or a TV show or a show on Netflix, you're there to collect that money and get it paid out to you. You went through all this effort. It makes no sense for you to miss out at the very last step, which is just the registrations being in place for you to sync up. I think we can close this out with some last pieces of advice. Anything that you guys, like some pet peeves that you see, or you go, I can't believe they did this again, or something like that that you would like to tell the people listening about.
I think one of the kind of the low-hanging fruit is making sure that as you're creating this music, or once you've kind of created, you have the master, before you close out any sort of session, make sure that you're getting at minimum the instrumental for your works if there are vocals, but also making sure that you, if possible, get the stems for your music. More times than not, a supervisor or ad agency, they're going to want at least the instrumental, but if they could get the stems, that's even better, because there are maybe moments where they may have to recreate a loop or slightly change something here. And more times they're going to go with a song that has all the files necessary to really make the project as successful as it can in their eyes. So making sure you can get instrumentals and stems on the front end, rather than kind of scouring to get those as things are potentially about to be placed.
I'd say, just knowing the difference between publishing and master side royalties and just splits. You're writing a song, yes, once that MP3 file is created, that's the master, but you need to have every person that worked on that song, all their splits figured out. It's way easier when you do the front end rather than releasing the song. Somebody wants to license it, splits kind of defined for a song. I'd also say if you're submitting to a library, the BPM should be in the file name, for example, or the key, like those little bits of data about the song that will help somebody learn more, maybe the mood of the song, finding places to put it that are easy to access for people. It'll make it so much easier to make your music stand out. A lot of the time, like Mackenzie said, people make music to briefs. So if a brief wants to be within the range of 100 to 120 beats per minute, then having that in the file name with the same type of mood that they're going for, that it just is easier for you to stumble across that and actually give it a listen. So put yourself in the shoes of the people who are going to be licensing your music and say, what can I do to help them make their job easier?
Yeah, that's fantastic advice, and honestly some stuff that I hadn't even heard before, even like putting the BPM in the file name, like something so simple can make a pretty big difference. Before we close out, if some of you guys listening are kind of unfamiliar with the terms that we've spoken, especially on the publishing side, which is kind of a little bit harder, a little bit less approachable for artists, especially if they're kind of new to the game, if you go to Songtrust's website, we have tons of resources that kind of explain all this stuff to you. We host webinars once a week, so sort of music publishing 101 vibe, where we just break down all this stuff in as easy as possible. There's graphs. I host them every once in a while, so you'll get to see me again, which is, of course, the best benefit to all of this. And I guess to end things off, Mackenzie, Charles, thank you so much for joining us. This was invaluable. I learned some new stuff. The people who joined, I'm certainly learned some new stuff. Crosstown Arts, everyone, hit them up. They're a fantastic resource for artists in Memphis. Thanks you guys again. Any closing words from you guys?
No, thank you all, and we super push that artists look at Songtrust as it's an invaluable service and resource.
Totally agree.
All right, guys. Thank you to everyone again for joining. Ciao, everyone.
Have a good one.